Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. Joining me is the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent, Benjamin Yount. You have recently published a story that is based on a report that says that the police calls to Milwaukee Public Schools spiked last fall. Why is this important? What happened?
This is a story that is one simple reporting of facts. The Badger Institute did a very good job of tracking down police calls to schools in Milwaukee. And they counted up how many were for assaults or how many were for a student with a gun or how many were for this, how many were for that. They also did the yeoman's work of comparing the call numbers for the fall semester, the 2022-2023 school year, the beginning of that, with past school years. And that if anybody has never had to do that kind of, comparison work, it is sometimes a bit drudgery, but it is important. So this story, half of this story, is a story about watching the number of calls for Milwaukee Police from Milwaukee Public Schools ramp up, spike up, skyrocket, pick your term. But this is also a story about what happens when you go woke. And Milwaukee Public Schools, starting in about 2016, moved to remove Milwaukee Police from their buildings. Originally, it was, well, you can patrol the grounds and you can be around, but we'd rather you spend your day in the car as opposed to walking the hallways with the kids. In 2020, after the death of George Floyd, the Milwaukee Public School Board voted to end their relationship, essentially kick Milwaukee Police out of every building, off the grounds. We don't want you. Now, if there was an emergency, they would call 911 and the police would come, but it's the difference of being at the school already and being 3, 5, 7, 10 minutes away. And so when you take a look at the skyrocketing number of police calls in the context of, well, a couple of years ago, you threw these police officers out of your buildings, it becomes a different story than just, oh, yeah, there are more misbehaved children in Milwaukee Public Schools. It becomes a story that opens the question of, well, did you invite more misbehavior by becoming political and demanding that Milwaukee Police leave because somebody in Minnesota died at the hands of police officers there?
So what is the upshot of this? Are there any recommendations that the Badger Institute makes, or is it a completely objective analysis?
The Badger Institute presents the facts, and they do what was always taught to me as the Bill Curtis School of Journalism. You give people the nut and you give them the bolt and you let them screw it together. And they lay out just in plain numbers what the situation is. And we quoted it. Said schools made 68 reports of battery this past fall compared to just over 100 for the entire 21-22 school year. 36 reports of somebody with a gun compared to 39 for the entire previous school year. 25 reports of sexual assaults compared to 39 for all of the last school year. They then lay out we asked Milwaukee's mayor what he thinks. And a spokesperson, because the mayor didn't respond, spokesperson said that there's probably going to have to be a relationship between the Milwaukee Police and Milwaukee Public Schools at some point. But one of the great parts about the internet, one of the fantastic parts about the time capsule that is Google searches, is it locks in quotes that don't age very well. And the Badger Institute didn't include this in their report, but we included it in our story. And it was a quote from Sequana Taylor, a school board member, back in the summer of 2022. And she said that she'd heard from many students that, quote, having police in schools does not present a positive effect. She went on and said, while I understand the need for police, I do not understand the need for them directly in our schools. And again, when you compare that to they had almost as many reports of batteries in the fall as they did the entire previous school year. You had nearly as many reports of somebody with a gun just last fall compared to the entire school year the year before. And you had 25 reports of sexual assault compared to 39 for all of the last school year. That stat, that data, those numbers from Badger, I think the school board members answered Taylor's question in black and white.
Do you have any additional information, background information that might benefit listeners on this particular story?
This is a story that I'm sure you could write in many cities because many cities followed the exact same template of Milwaukee. Madison schools, I'm certain you could write this story, and I'm certain that the numbers would be very similar. This, again, sort of like the recent story that we wrote with Will going to court against Comcast over race-based discrimination. You had a lot of school districts decide to focus on race, decide to focus on racial disparities. And they, too, asked their local police departments, invited them to leave, cut services. And now you're turning around and seeing the repercussions of that. And so this is not just a Milwaukee Public Schools story. You could certainly write this in Madison, and I would imagine you could write this in most other big cities across the country.
Well, thank you, Ben. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Benjamin Yount, this is Bruce Walker. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.